Good afternoon and warm welcome to all the participants. Today we have the pleasure of having Dr. K Panda with us. Sir is Principal Scientist, Quality Assurance and Management, ICAR-Central Institute of Fisheries Technology, Cochin, Kerala. And the topic chosen by our esteemed guest is Seafood Quality Assurance and Safety Regulations. Sir, you are audible as well as visible, and your presentation is also visible. Please start, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And thank you, the organizers, for giving me the opportunity to talk about the subject, which has been my pet subject for the last 20 years. So, to briefly introduce myself, I'm working as a principal scientist in ICAR-Central Institute of Fisheries Technology, Cochin. And today's topic is seafood quality assurance and safety regulations. So, this topic encompasses two areas. One is the quality of the seafood, and sometimes it calls quality of fish, and also the regulations or the safety regulation that is embedded into it. So as you know, the food safety has been a buzzword in the recent years with the introduction of many regulations all over the world, export-import regulations, the role played by codex for SPS measures. So the countries were empowered to frame their own regulations. So a lot of harmonizations has taken place all over the world, including India. Similarly, seafood, or you can say fish and fish products, have acquired the dimension of a product which is transferred across the globe.
The 7 stages of paradox that every man should know. Stage 1.
Am I audible? I'm listening to some other voice. Am I audible, sir?
You are audible, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So, as you know, the fish and fish products have also acquired the global dimension of being transferred, or you can say being traded across the world. So, it is one of the highest traded commodity as far as food is concerned, apart from beef. So, I'll be initially talking about the quality of the fish and what are the measures that you can take to preserve the quality of the fish, and followed by the food safety aspects related to seafood. So as you know, quality as you define is the sum of all properties and attributes of food items that are acceptable to the consumers. So quality as such encompasses many things. It can encompass safety, origin, nutrition, sensory, authenticity, convenience, functional, aesthetical, ethical. There's so many aspects actually make the quality of the product. And as you know, the consumer expectation can be subjective, and the producer specification can be objective. And together, we decide whether this quality is appropriate, and we call that as a fitness for consumption. So the fitness for consumption basically comes from the subjective analysis by the consumer and the objective analysis by the producer. So what are the determinants of quality? The consumers feel that there is absence of fraud and adulteration. Nowadays, if you've seen, the people consume, there is an adulteration of fish with formaldehyde, ammonia, on it to additives. So people perceive that it is not adulterated, and I'm not cheated. I'm not given a fish which is of low quality or substituted with a low quality fish or low economically valued fish with a high value one. So the absence of fraud also is a determinant of quality. Apart from that, we have also expected organoleptic and nutritional characteristics, like, for example, it should be good appreciable sensory properties, safety, freshness, appealing appearance, followed by added value, like now people are concerned about from where it is harvested. It is harvested from a ecologically sustainable area. Based upon these, now a number of standards came up, like eco-labeling standards came up. That is called source attribution. Then production area of origin, the geographical origin, like whether it's captured from aquaculture or from wild capture. A lot of research goes into identifying whether it is from aquaculture or wild capture. Then, when I talk about quality control, it is maintenance of quality at level that satisfies the customer and that is economical to the producer or the seller. And as you know, quality factors can be so many. I'm just briefly pointing out, if it is a fish product, so many things can be like freshness, species, pectoral count, salt content, smoke flavor. It depends upon what kind of product or what kind of fish and fish product you are consuming, or it is presented to the consumer. So it can be so many quality factors that influences the final determinant of the quality. So when you go for a quality control, there can be 4 aspects like process certificate specification, product specification, inspection, and process control. These are the 4 benchmarks of a quality control program wherever you want to run. So then next is quality assurance. There is another word apart from quality control. So quality, if you see the right side, the circulars, the circles. So the whole quality system encompasses quality assurance, and quality assurance actually has this quality control within. So quality assurance is nothing but all those planned and systematic actions necessary to provide adequate confidence that a product or service will satisfy the given requirements for quality. That is, actually you are giving, assuring the consumer that I have done something in the background, I have a planned activity, I have taken some systematic actions before I am presenting the food to you, so that it actually arises around this adequate confidence in the minds of the customer that the food that I am consuming is safe. So based upon this quality assurance, the number of approaches have been developed all over the world, starting with HACCP, Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point, which started way back in 1950s, 60s for astronauts, and subsequently it was introduced in no acid canned foods, and subsequently it has become a benchmark for every food safety standards, whether it is government enforced standards or private standards, or private food safety standards. HACCP becomes an integral part of every food safety standards in the world. So basically, again, quality assurance consists of, again, 4 things: process checklist, process standards, process documentation, and project audit. So the last one, audit, is an integral part of an quality assurance system. That means you are cross-verifying that your system is functioning as per your intended goals. Sometimes we call it an anticipated risk-based management system. When it's called management, we call it an anticipated risk-based system. So you anticipate the risk beforehand and design the quality assurance program. So you can have different QC/QA tools, starting with a check fishbone diagram to find out what the what are the things that is completely interlinked to the determinant of the quality. You can also judge whether your quality system or quality assurance program is functioning by having histograms, Pareto chart, control chart, scatter diagrams, stratification. These are the things that industry people use it, whether it is food industry or automobile industry or electronic industry. Everybody uses these QC tools. As similar QC tools are also being used in food industry in different ways, in different persons, for assuring the consumer of the quality. Now comes to the core thing like spoilage quality. Like for example, we talk sometimes fish is fresh and sometimes we call it fish is spoiled. Now, as you know, loss of freshness is a continuous process after post-harvest. So once fish is spoiled, it is irreversible. You cannot bring back, you cannot make a spoiled fish as a fresh fish. And in the spoilage, there is a simultaneous role of autolytic, chemical, and microbial processes. So it's not that one process goes on only, what you can call a continuous or unidirectionally. There is a concomitant role of all the 3 while fish spoils. So all the designs that we do to arrest the spoilage, so all the design that we do to arrest the spoilage is somewhere directed towards either stopping autolytic process or microbial process or chemical process. So the factor that affects the fish and fish product can be harvesting method. How do you harvest the fish? For example, if you harvest the fish with the minimal amount of you can stress to the fish will remain fresh for a long time. The post-product changes, which are maybe linked to the intrinsic characters like shape, size, fat content, skin characteristics, also influences the final quality of the fish. How do you handle the fish after post-harvest? If the fish is undergoing temperature abuse or a physical damage due to stacking or due to the kind of thing that we do on board or the kind of thing that we do in the harbors or in the harvest sites to prevent these two aspects like temperature abuse and physical damage also determines the final quality of the fish. Now, preservation approaches, there can be a number of preservation approaches, whether you go for chilling, freezing, smoking, curing, high pressure processing, or whatever it may be. So that also has influence on the final quality of the fish. And if it is aquacultured fish, we talk about the dietary composition plays a vital role in giving a particular quality of the fish. If the fish is fed with feed with high content of EP and DHA, or you can say with astaxanthin or something colors, and particularly salmon aquaculture, they use this kind of color. So that also a different quality of fish will come. So that also has some small role in final quality of the fish and fish product. So what can be the compelling reasons for spoilage of fish? As you know, fish is a unique substrate for microbial growth, which means that the microbial growth gets enhanced when fish is a substrate. And sometimes the poikilothermic nature of the fish actually selects the bacteria that can thrive in wide range of temperatures. So you do not have a selectivity built into it, but the wide range of bacteria can also come into the picture, like you can say cyclotropic bacteria, which also can spoil the fish at below room temperature towards your chilling temperature. If they are more prevalent, then your spoilage also gets enhanced. High postmortem pH in the flesh, which is typically more than 6.0 in many of the fishes, which indirectly allows the growth of selective pH-sensitive organisms like Salmonella putrefaciens. Also is important because Salmonella is considered as one of the specific spoilage flora of the fish. And presence of non-protein nitrogen in large quantities, particularly gastropods and some other organisms will find non-protein nitrogen fraction is higher, and free amino acid content. So they actually induces more spoilage. Presence of trimethylamine oxide in brine fishes, which is a typical flavor compound, as you know, and also high content of unsaturated fatty acids, which post-mortem conditions may lead to rapid oxidation, leading to off flavor. So what are the options we have, and what are the opportunities we have for managing fish quality? I'll be dealing with all these points in a little bit detail afterwards, but so initially we can have hygienic designing of fishing vessels, the marine capture fisheries, implementation of good aquaculture practices. If you have aquaculture sourced fish, then the basic thing that happens is that fish is captured from a very pristine water in the sea. But the way it is handled subsequently actually spoils the fish, or you can say deteriorates the quality. So the main reason being the absence of potable water and ice in the primary production centers. So people carry ice and water in the boat while going for venturing into the sea. So even the aquaculture sites, we are also giving ice after it is harvested. So if the ice and water is not good quality, then it actually influences the final quality of the fish. So this is one of the aspects by which you can change the whole fish quality in the post-harvest chain. Apart from that, hygienic designing of fishing harbors and jetties. We have fishing harbors and jetties, but if you go for hygiene ranking throughout India, you will find they're very low ranked. In some cases, although fishing harbors have been commissioned in different states with a lot of foreign funding, but you will not find proper disposal of waste, proper provision of good quality water, and the toilet facilities, all those things mentioned. Then hygienic designing of fish markets. Always fish market has been a synonym for any chaos that happens in our society. So as you know, so now people talk about hygienic design of fish markets. All the contamination, most of the major contamination actually comes to the fish, comes in the fish market. From the CIT study earlier, we have actually tracked the fish from the harvest center from the primary production center to the consumer. We find that fish markets are the major source of all contaminants, including both biological and chemical origin. Then again, as you know, the domestic transport plays a major role in provision of fish to the hinterlands. For example, the fishes for aquaculture fish from Andhra Pradesh goes as distant places, northeastern states like Manipur, Meghalaya, Assam, all the places. So if you do not have a good transportation system where there is intermittent change of ice, or the transportation system itself is not designed to preserve the fish or to keep the temperature at keep temperature low, or you can say the temperature abuse is not prevented, then there are chances of spoiling the fish. So the cold chain logistics is a major role that modern policymakers have to think about wherever there is a aquaculture site or wherever there is marine capture fisheries. In fact, with this Gati Shakti scheme that is brought about by Government of India, now has integrated this cold chain logistics into its program things, so that we expect that in the long run, the fisheries sector will be benefited by this cold chain logistics program by Government of India. So coming to fishing vessels, there is a guideline for monitoring of fishing vessels. There is a very good document by Export Inspection Council. You can cross-check. So it gives an idea about what should be there in the fishing vessels, what is the proper design of the hygienic design of the fishing vessel, what can be a cleaning and disinfection of surfaces, storage containers, what should be the frequency, with the pest control. When the vessels lie in the shore on the harbor, there are chances that the pests can enter into the fishing vessels and maybe there for the permanent resident of the fishing vessels. So that measures has to be controlled. And temperature control, like designing of fish holds, also forms an integral part. The major problem that we find in fishing vessels operating from Indian region is record keeping. We'll rarely find the proper record keeping by most of the fishing vessels. Maybe they may be keeping where from the GPS, the coordinates, they may be keeping where from they're getting the catch. But you will not be able, when they're going for multi-day fishing, where the first catch was kept, and subsequent catches, number of hauls they take in suppose they go for 10 to 14 days of fishing, you do not know where the first catch or the first haul is kept and the subsequent hauls are kept. So everything gets mixed up, and finally you don't know where it was caught, from which water or which area it has been caught. So to pinpoint, we are trying actually earlier days to find out the what they call the hazard profile of the marine coast. So it's very difficult if you try to trace out from which area the fish has been caught, whether it is a area which is more prone to pollution, more prone to industrial discharge. So for that, record keeping plays an important role. There is something called good fishing vessel practices have been started by USFDA. You have to think about that. Then next is good aquaculture practices. Good aquaculture practice, of course, there are a number of foreign players, you can say a number of certification agencies now in place, which are giving certification for good aquaculture practices with the best of BAP by Global Aquaculture Alliance. We have WWF. Similarly, in India also we have taken an initiative to publish 5 different standards for good aquaculture practices by Bureau of Indian Standards. Ministry of Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairy is behind all the state governments and stakeholders to implement these good aquaculture practices. Very beautifully designed standards on shrimp hatchery, for catfish farming, for aquaculture, like for carps, for freshwater prawns. So this has already been there. So you can go back to, it's all freely downloadable. You can see all the standards and see whether it can be implemented in our aquaculture systems. The advantage of having a GAP is that the product that comes out from a farm which is having good aquaculture practice has more market value and more acceptability for the processors, for the exporters, and also for the consumers. Then another thing is ice and water. As I told you, you can see in the pictures, the ice is taken from a good ice plant or bad ice plant. We don't know, but many of the ice plants are now registered by FSSAI. So we can say that we can have a predominantly good quality ice, but the ice is being spoiled by just dumping onto the shore, and people starts breaking into pieces, then load onto the boat, and ultimately you take very bad quality ice, and you bring a good quality fish mixed with bad quality ice, and the fish becomes bad. So then there are crosses available. The crosser size do not fit. Many cases we found the crosser is a smaller size, the ice is a bigger ice blocks are bigger size, so they have to push into that, they have to break into it. So these all practices goes on in our front, and that spoils the quality. So whenever there is a fishing vessel or fishing harbor design, fishing harbors, wherever state government people who are attending this meeting, or anybody who is concerned with the sector, see that this is a small intervention we can do by providing a good quality ice to the fishing vessels. Then also other options like we can have to shift to tube ice or flake ice or slurry ice in fishing sector. And these are also on board slurry ice systems that started some time back. I don't know why that is not successful, but these are a good system that they can generate ice there itself on the boat and use it. And also there is a compliance to IS 10,500. The water that is used for manufacturing the ice should definitely conform to Indian standard 10,500 drinking water quality. Then hygiene fishing harbors, we have a good document by FAO on fishing harbor planning, construction and management. FAO technical paper 539 you can check. So fishing harbors should be designed as per these suggestions or guidelines given by FAO. The basic feature is that there should be a hygienic design, toilet and waste disposal facility. These are the two important parameters of a fishing harbor, where the toilets are not good or toilets are not provided and waste disposal are not there, then the quality of the fish will ultimately turn bad. Similarly, access control, if you find some fishing harbors, dogs, pets, everything, all uninvited guests are there in the fishing harbors. So those people should be prevented. Some fishing harbors I find in Kerala and some parts of India, they have done this access control. You have to take a ticket or something, you have to pay some money to go inside the fishing harbor. Then it is also mandatory to have a hygiene officer appointed by state government or MPDA or whatever, or any other agency should have appointed hygiene officer to look after the hygiene of the fishing harbors. And effluent treatment, now effluent treatment plants are all installed or commissioned in every fishing harbor, so that the whatever the fish is what in the waste under the shore, those waste water, it doesn't go into the sea or under the water without treatment. Then comes to the hygienic fish markets. There is a Bureau of Indian Standards, IS standard 14520 2018. So there is a guideline for operational cleanliness and layout of the markets. So many of the markets in different parts of India now being developed with taking into consideration the guideline given by BIS standard. So you can follow this IS 14520. Again, it's freely downloadable from the BIS site. And you can see that if these ideas are actually taken up by the governments, so we can have a very good fish market. Now comes to the regulation part. So this is all about the quality and aspects and what are the options and opportunities we have to manage the quality. Now we go to the second part of my talk is regulating food. Now, basic tenet of any food regulation or basic principle of any food regulation is to protect against economic fraud and to prevent against the sale of unsafe food. So any regulation that has been made all over the world, whether European regulation or Indian regulation or US FDA or whatever, Japanese, the main goal is to prevent the sale of unsafe food. So we have now historical perspective of food adulteration. People do adulteration because there are greedy people in the food chain who want to preserve the fish and want to preserve the food so that they can get better price. So these perspectives are also there. So these aspects also are taken care of while regulating food. Then again, liability shifted to government to protect consumers. Now everybody thinks that people are adulterating, people are bad quality food is available. Now government is responsible, but equally responsible is also the consumers who have to raise their voice, who have to also have some practices to see that the food is of good quality. Now, because of that, there is the legislative oversight for international trade. Internationally, wherever there is international trade, many countries have framed regulations so that the good quality food or good quality seafood is being transit across the world. So as you know, the global seafood consumption has increased by 9-fold in the last 70 years. And that is the reason why seafood is considered as one of the highest traded commodity, touching up to $164 billion the trade. And the important part of that is that 38% of the global fish production enters international trade. 90% of the trade is processed products. And out of that, 37% is frozen. And most important thing is 69% imported by developed nations and 54% exported by developing nations. So the developing nations where the hygiene and sanitation is perceived to be low, where the hygiene and sanitation is not considered to be on par with the developed nations, are the major exporters of seafood. So that is the reason why every time we talk about rejections, import refusals, and oh, bad quality, that quality, that this is banned, that is banned, all those things comes into picture. So always the regulators are busy in finding out the flaws of the developing nations. So India has a major role now. We are the one of the fourth largest exporter of seafood now. So we have to think about, we have to all energize ourselves to take out that tag that we are a country which is having poor hygiene and sanitation standards. Now, coming to different regulations that is prevalent in all the other countries, they talk about EU regulations or EU legislations. They talk about regulations, directives, decision, recommendations, opinions. So if you see the regulations, they are different. Everything is not regulation. Something is a directive, something is a decision, something is recommendation, something is opinion. So regulation is always mandatory. As you know, wherever there is a regulation or fixed to it, it is always mandatory. And when it's directive, it sets out a goal. You can say it is a one type of you can say compliance document. It is not mandatory, but people can build upon that directive. For example, the water quality regulation 98/83, the water quality, the water that is used in fish processing industry is a directive. That means the water quality has to be as per the directive. You can have more stringent than that, but not below that. Similarly, a decision means it's directly applicable. Sometimes a decision is taken to say that, okay, we are going to take 30% of this consignment coming from India for antibiotic residues. So that's a decision. Sometimes it comes recommendation, opinion, also self-explanatory, but those are not mandatory in nature. I'm just briefly showing, I'm not going to detail about what are the regulations we have, but major regulations in the European Union for your for knowledge. The mother regulation is 178/2002. In 2002, the foods regulation came, and because of that, European Food Safety Authority was established. And after that, three regulations, these are called hygiene regulations. 852, 853, 854 are the hygiene regulations for as far as European Union is concerned. So all our major things are built upon these three regulations, 852, 853, 854, where it is given how to export the seafood commodity to a fish and fish product to European Union, what kind of hygiene measures you should have during the production. Similarly, other regulations like 2070/2005 talks about microbiological criteria for foodstuffs. For example, there are microbiological criteria while you export to European Union. We have criteria for salmonella in cooked product, listeria in semi-preserved as well as in the cooked product. We have E. coli and staphylococcus requirement in frozen crustaceans and heat-sucked mollusks. European Union regulation doesn't talk about all the requirements for all the commodities. Similarly, we have 1881/2006, which talks about the heavy metal requirements in fish and fish products. You'll find a listing for lead, cadmium, mercury. Arsenic is not still regulated by European Union. We have 333/2007 talks about method of sampling and analysis. Pesticide, of course, there was no pesticide requirement for European Union for exporting fish to European Union, but recently imidacloprid has been included. Imidacloprid has been included for export to European Union. Then we have new regulation 2021/808. If you export to European Union and you perform any method of testing, so whether the method is okay or not, you want to know whether the method is validated or not, you properly or verified properly or not, you have to use this. You have to develop method as per this regulation 2021/808 regulation. Then we have one of the major regulations is 37/2010, which talks about pharmacological active substances. You'll find all the limits or MRL of antibiotics or pharmacological active substances in this 37/2010 regulation. If you want to know what is the limit for oxytetracycline fish while you export to European Union, or chloramphenicol, or you can say nitrofurans, you'll find in 37/2010. In 31/2010, there is two annexes, Annex 1 and Annex 2. Annex 2 is the list of pharmacological banned or can say prohibited pharmacological active substances. There are actually 9 compounds which are prohibited, which should not be present at all while export to European Union. Then we have something like food additives 1333/2008. This is also very interesting regulation. If you want to see as per European Union requirement, you'll find that there is a categorization called processed and unprocessed fishery product. According to European Union, for information, I can say chilled fish, frozen fish, or filleted fish is not called as a processed fish. These are called unprocessed fish. So for the unprocessed fish, the food editing requirement is different. Then what kind of information you should provide to consumers while you are exporting? So there is 1169/2011, and there is also another regulation that has come in 2013 about the mandatory information that you are supposed to give when you are exporting the product to European Union based upon the IUU regulation. That is, you have to inform the category of fishing gear that has to be mentioned while exporting to EU. Now coming to USA, USA has, in USA, the food is regulated by different agencies. Not like in India, we have only one Export Inspection Council or FSSAI, but they have different agencies come takes a role in regulating food in USA. One United States Department of Agriculture, for example, our farm-raised wild-caught catfish comes under USDA regulation. And US FWS talks about wildlife services that talks about that endangered species sites regulation. So while import, export, transport, anything that's covered under endangered species will come under this act. There is another called NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which functioned under USDC, United States Department of Commerce. This is then nothing but the competent authority for export health certification. Like our Export Inspection Council in USA, NOAA is the competent authority and also regulate this illegal on IUU catch documentation for US seafood products. The major role is played for seafood in US FDA. They have something called FNDC Act, Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act, under which everything comes, including your adulteration, filth, salmonella, whatever antibiotics, everything covered under that. And there is one more very interesting thing is that HACCP is integral to US FDA export. For example, if you want to export fish to USA, we should have mandatorily implemented HACCP in the plant. So seafood HACCP regulations is 21, Code of Federal Regulation 123. You go and see that this is mandatory. So HACCP is mandatorily to be implemented if you want to export fish to USA. And they have a something called predictive risk-based evaluation for import compliance, predict system. So this for screening imported seafood. For information I can give, USA, almost 88 to 89% of the seafood consumed in USA is actually imported from other countries, and India being the major exporter to USA. But for information, only 2 to 3% of the imported product or imported seafood is actually checked, actually tested. But rest you can say 80 to 85% goes untested. But they have very good system, software-based evaluation system to cross-check the seafood that has been imported. Then in 2011, USA has implemented Food Safety and Modernization Act, FSSAI, and it came into picture in 2011. So the shift is now to prevention, and most of the seafood exporters are complying with it. For other commodities, they had a different requirement, like for hazard analysis, risk-based preventive control started by FSMA for produce and vegetables. But as HACCP was already mandatory for seafood, so this FSMA Act is many aspects of the FSMA Act is not applicable to seafood. Now coming to China, China is one of the major. Now you are the import of seafood from India. Some time back, Chinese regulations are very complicated and very most of these languages are in Chinese. It's very difficult to know what is the requirement, what is our requirement. So, but now Chinese regulations have become harmonized across the world because they thought that now we have to make it simpler for getting the seafood from different countries. So they have different kinds of standards: the basic standards, standards for additives, the hygiene requirements, then the testing requirement. The four basic the pillars of Chinese regulations. You can see the basic standards. Under that, we have maximum level of contaminants, pathogen limits, mycotoxins, additives. I will not read out everything, but everything is there in that. So you'll find that Chinese regulations are much more simplified, and it is available now in English translated form and mostly harmonized across the for different countries. Some of the Chinese regulations are applicable to seafood. For example, we have 2763/2021. You can see the maximum residue limits for pesticides in food, which is applicable to us. Veterinary drug residues in food. contaminants in food, pathogen limits in food. These are the four highlighted things, is very much applicable to our seafood products. You can go and check. For example, many of these commodities are now, many requirements are made not arbitrarily based on a risk assessment, and based upon this WTO portal comments, they have modified it. Then, but the recent problem that we're facing to China have been the key COVID-19 related measures. China has rejected number of consignments from India because of the presence of COVID on the outer surface of the packaging material. In 2020 it came, so many of rejections we have got. But I can say that most of them are unscientific. There is no basis of rejecting a seafood consignment based upon the presence of COVID virus on the outer surface of the packaging material. So India has contested it at a number of forums. Now going back to Russia regulations, Russia is now big war-related issues, but India also was a major exporter to Russia. So the number of regulations are there for Russia. For example, these hygienic requirements, and very complicated, I can say you, the Russian regulations, because their standards are not harmonized. For example, the arsenic requirement is around 5 ppm. So many of the rejections we had from Russia is because of arsenic. We have presence of crystal violet, a number of bacterial load, like they called, they have different bacterial load requirements for chilled fish, for frozen fish, for boiled fish, for pasteurized fish. So sometimes compliance requirement becomes very difficult for Russian regulation, but still India has exported a large number of consignment to Russia. Nothing comes back from Russia for information. Even if it is rejected, everything is consumed after the get rejection alert. Comes to Japan. Now, Japan has very stringent SPS measures because most of that is consumed as raw or uncooked form. So they have a positive list system for MRL, for agricultural chemicals and foods. There is for pesticide around 900 almost chemicals, and there is uniform limit of 0.01 ppm. There is nothing but limit of quantification around 10 ppb. And apart from that, they have also other regulations like Food Safety, Food and Sanitation Act, and food additives requirement. Then there's Food Best Safety Basic Act. So while exporting, you have to see that you are actually complying to many of these regulations which are notified by different agencies in Japan. Now coming back to our role and what we can do. So I'll make it simple in the sense, what is the global perception of fish product? Fish is consumed, considered as a major vehicle for transmission of foodborne diseases. And many safety concerns are there, but most of the important safety concerns, the global scale, has been seawater toxin, histamine poisoning, norovirus. The seawater and seawater and norovirus may not be prominent for India, but in future it will be also very important because of climate change. And we have also antimicrobial residues in aquaculture products, also is a major food safety hazard in fish and fish product. So while you set standards and standards are formulated, a number of factors are there, starting with handling and preparation, quality of raw material, processing methods, climate change, cross-contamination. So all these aspects actually are important factors while you actually set a standard, whether in India or across the globe. Now, while you make a standard, food safety standard, so you can say MRL or maximum permissible level or whatever, or maximum level, it is done by an elaborate process called risk analysis. And risk analysis has three components called risk management, risk communication, and risk assessment. The core is risk assessment, by which actually we see that the food, whether this food and hazard combination is actually harmful to the consumer or not. So everything which is hazardous is not risk. So first, risk assessment is done by academic institutions, research laboratories like us, and this is communicated to the managers, risk managers to the regulators, and risk managers finally they notify the MRL and communicate to the public. So the governance of seafood, if you can say, or governance of food, has many players into this picture. You can say the private sector, public sector, both are involved in that. And it depends on the space and scale, like what kind of space we have, like whether there's a climate change impact is there, or ecological localization is there, or economic globalization is there, and number of institutions that are involved in making the regulation more perfect or less perfect. Like in a sense, there can be precautionary based approach. Like you do not have any idea whether this particular hazard is risky for the consumer or not. Simply by precautionary approach, you set a limit, and that is called and you go by as low as applicable, no? LRR principle, like as low as reasonably achievable. That target you put. Sometimes sometimes in food commodities, or a particular contaminant or a particular hazard. And if you see the Indian rejections, you'll find most of the rejections from USA has been filth and salmonella. That is from Japan. Earlier days we have ethoxyquin rejection. Now it is not there. But major rejection from Japan has been furazolidone as AOZ. From Russia, we have this pathogen and presence of crystal violet polyforms requirement. And for European Union, we have rejections from metals, lead, cadmium, mercury, antibiotic residues, foodborne pathogens, organoleptic quality, histamine, unapproved additives, and biotoxins. So these are the major things that India is facing while exporting to different commodity countries. And we have, this is to sum up the chemical hazards are like veterinary drug residues. We have seen number of aquaculture products. You'll find residues of approved and unapproved, you can say, antibiotics. Many of them are prohibited antibiotics like nitrofuran metabolites, chloramphenicol are rejected in aquaculture products. And pesticide residues, because the close proximity of the aquaculture farms to the agricultural operations. So it can come by seepage, it can come by you can say precipitation, it can come by long range transport. So pesticides is very much prevalent in is a problem in our fish and fish product. Apart from that, we have heavy metals like lead, cadmium, mercury in problem issues, in particularly cadmium problem in cephalopods, polyaromatic hydrocarbons like benzopyrene in smoke products, PCBs in fishery product. Now we are getting this now for many of these commodities, particularly for migratory fishes. Formaldehyde adulteration, which was a major, you can say, in the notice, or you can say in the print media, electronic media, everything formaldehyde adulteration was a major news in 3-4 years back. Apart from that, we have major marine biotoxins like PSP, DSP, SP, and SP, apart from the cigotoxin. Some of the rejections in many years, in last 10 years, we have got for cigotoxin also. In microbiological issues, salmonella has been major stumbling block. Most of the rejection from USA is of salmonella. As far as CIP's study is concerned, almost 30% of the fish and fish products sold in Indian market with having prevalence of salmonella. 30% is a big prevalence rate, you can say. Of late, we are more concerned about antimicrobial resistance, AMR, presence of AMR bacteria in seafood. Fermented products of northeastern region also has been major focus nowadays. Listeria monocytogenes problem in comminuted products like surimi plants, and histamine in chilled consignments for export. So in India, we have Bureau of Indian Standards. You can say the number of medical standards, Bureau of Indian Standards, most of them are not mandatory. You know, Bureau of Indian Standards are voluntary standards. So we have standards for canned products, for dried products, for frozen products, for byproducts, and 6 traceability standards, and feed and code of practices. So there are 26 out of 47 are vertical standards in Bureau of Indian Standards. You can go and see all the standards, which are freely downloadable, and these are all not mandatory in nature, these are voluntary in nature. Whereas FSSAI, that's the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, there are almost 30 standards. So it comes under section 2.6 of Food Safety and Standards, Food Product Standards, and Food Additive Regulations. So there are standards for frozen shrimp, lobster, squid, finfish, sardine oil, fish pickle. I'm not reading all the things, but we have standards covering most of the fishery products. Recently added standards are pasteurized fish sausage, crab meat, gelatin from fish processing waste, as well as fish oil as a new standard that is coming up by FSSAI. Now, in India, so the FSSAI, as you know, Food Safety Standard Act in 2006. So after that, Food Safety Regulations came in 2011. After that, there was a major role played by FSSAI to harmonize Indian regulations for all the commodities and catering to the requirements of the different importing countries. So, as you know, earlier regulations like Food Safety Standard Act, when it was formulated, it took whatever was there in the Food Prevention of Food Adulteration Act, PFA, which was formulated in 1955-56. So those things came, so that it become very obsolete. So India has almost now harmonized most of the regulations. There are 21 regulations are in picture, which cover product standards, additives, contaminants, toxins, residue, packaging labeling, laboratory sampling and analysis, recall, import, auditing, recognition and notification of laboratories. So all these are now part of this FSSR, Food Safety and Standard Regulations. For fish and fishery products, we have microbiological specification. There are 16 categories of product as far as notified by Government of India. These are all mandatory in nature. Now, there are two criteria in microbiological specification. One is hygiene criteria, one is food safety criteria. The hygiene criteria, for example, total plate count, we can say the Staphylococcus aureus count, and this eastern mold count. These are not mandatory in nature. So you can reprimand the processor or the manufacturer that your limits are exceeding. But there is another criteria called food safety criteria, which includes E. coli, Salmonella, Vibrio cholerae, Listeria monocytogenes, and Clostridium botulinum. These are mandatory criteria, but of course these are different for different commodities, which are not equally applicable to all the commodities or all the 16 categories. So these high food safety criteria is mandatory and enforceable. So that means somebody is violating that, then legal action can be taken against that person or the manufacturer. Then we have heavy metal requirement. Now for lead, cadmium, arsenic, mercury, chromium, and methyl mercury, we have limits for crustaceans, for finfish, for bivalve mollusks. I'm not showing all to the because it will be a big topic if I want to show the limits for each one. Similarly, prohibited pharmacological active substances is under revision. This will be notified soon. Already there are 24 compounds listed under this, which is being revised, but already 24 compounds are banned or prohibited, not to be present in any fish and fish product. Similarly, veterinary drug residues, we have now 12 compounds listed under FSSR Act, including ampicillin, oxytetracycline, cloxacillin, albendazole. I'm not saying all the names, but these are all given in the regulation. Pesticides, we have two pesticides which are regulated by FSSAI, quinalphos and carbaryl. Rest of the pesticides has to be found at very low, at very uniform limit of 10 ppb, below 10 ppb limit. So pesticides also, as far as Indian regulation is concerned, is very stringent, unlike any other commodity. We have limit for pH and PCBs for fish and fish product, benzopyrin 5 ppb requirement for smoked fish. We have PCB limit for 0.5 ppm and 2 ppm. They are for migratory fish and inland fish. India has also notified marine biotoxin requirement like PSP, DSP, SP, and SP, and biotoxin in bivalve mollusks. So what are the challenges that we are facing in regulation? So as you know, post-COVID, people are aware of, hyper-aware, not aware, they're hyper-aware of health. So they want to eat something which is very safe and which is very nutritious also. So there is a growing preference for organic, antibiotic, and preservative-free and locally sourced food. So these are the, again, challenges that we may face in fish and fish product. Like somebody markets organic aquaculture fish, organic fish. Now, how to say that it's organic and it is not actually no antibiotic or no fertilizer, nothing has been added. So there's a major challenge for regulators again to certify it as an organic. Now, regulation must not be antithetical to innovation. Now, regulation should not stop innovation. You can have different kind of innovations to preserve the food. So that is again a challenge for academicians and people who are participating in this refresher course in universities. So we must innovate. We must continue to innovate to provide safe food to the consumers. Then next is benchmarking and harmonization. And the confusing landscape for food manufacturing sector. They do not know actually which regulation to follow. For example, an exporter from India wants to export to different countries. Now he has to comply with Japan, USA, European Union, simultaneously comply with the requirements of the FSSAI. So it becomes a very challenging thing. Apart from that, there are also private food safety standards like British Retail Consortium standards, international IFS standards, SQF standards. So the whole, if you go to America or a food processing industry, the 24/7 and 365 days, that fellow is busy in complying to the audit requirements. That is the reason why the national legislation must be based upon codex. Codex made a benchmark regulation. Every country has to follow, but it doesn't happen. Now, you know, there are proactive regulations. Like regulations can be proactive also. For example, in 1993, USDA classified E. coli as an adulterant in meat, thereby reducing E. coli-borne illness by 50%. So that is what, before a pathogen or before a contaminant comes to the food, our researchers or our academicians must work on the subject to inform the government that this can be a potential contaminant, so government can frame regulations and thereby prevent the illnesses. The regulation must be dynamic, change with risk assessment, and that's what it cannot be like made in 1955 and we are still sticking to that. What was there in 1955, now we should follow. In many regulations in India, for example, this antibiotic regulation has become very old. So that is why FSSAI is now revising those regulations. You can see this EU regulation 181/2006, which was for contaminant in food. Now there is undergone 37 amendment. That means the regulations are changing every time depending upon the risk assessment that is coming by the risk assessment reports or risk assessment research that is being undertaken by researchers across academic institutions. A recent report says that the percentage of non-compliance for veterinary drug residues is lowest in the decade. Now we have seen that veterinary drug residues as a major stumbling block not to export to European Union. They say it is only 0.19% now. It has come down so low. So people say there are a lot of incidents of veterinary drug, antibiotics in seafood. But you see the incidence is only 0.19%. Media and print media highlights it on the bigger scale. Actually, it is not. It is so low as far as veterinary drug is concerned. So we can think of futuristic regulation because, as you know, climate change is impacting a major role. So I'm finishing in just 1 minute. Climate change risk. So that's food production contribute 37% global greenhouse emission. So we can think of less use of agrochemicals, and think of cell culture based products. Now this cell grown meat has picked up. We can, I think by 2050, we can think of cell grown fish. We can think of upstream of fish waste. Fish waste has to be utilized to every none of this fish particle, none of this waste that comes out of the fishery industry should be unutilized. Should go for either for direct consumption or extraction of you can say bioactive substances or for pet foods. Now another thing is food forensics. As you know, population explosion or population is growing and the area of culture is diminishing. So we can think of food forensics as a new branch for assuring food safety to consumers. Another thing is microplastics. Now many researchers across India have started working on microplastics. As you know, there is almost 8 million tons of plastic end up in ocean. So this is another area that researchers must work on. Microplastics. People are getting microplastics not in the elementary canal, but now microplastics, nanoplastics we started getting in the tissues, which is a major problem in the long run. As I told you again, organic versus non-organic conundrum. This is how to classify a fish as an organically grown fish. AMR, many institutions are part of this AMR network. I may not deal with directly, but as per Lancet, 1.2 million deaths occur directly to AMR, and fish is not out of that. So as you know, we use antibiotics in aquaculture, so we must think about this antibiotic usage, withdrawal time, proper usage of antibiotics, not using for prophylactic measure. It should be directed for a particular disease. Okay. Then high priority critical important antimicrobials like colistin, polymyxin B. Now FSSAI has banned colistin for use in any aquaculture operations. So must not see that this high priority critical important antimicrobials are not used in aquaculture at all. And again, think it's emerging contaminant like brominated flame retardant. These are coming because of your personal care compounds, our lifestyle changes. These are all accumulating into the sea, into the rivers, and those are accumulating, and these may turn out to be a major challenge in the coming days. Similarly, methyl mercury standard is getting changed. As you know, in fish, most of the mercury, even from the organic form, methyl mercury. So there is a revision coming up by Codex Committee, so that has also been changed. Then semicarbazide, as you know, nitrofuran metabolite. This has been naturally present in freshwater shrimp, scampi. So again, think of this kind of research. That regulation may come with regulating this kind of compounds which is naturally present in fish and fish product like formaldehyde to some extent. Inorganic arsenic also they're present in fish oil. New limits are coming with fish oil of 0.1 ppm of inorganic arsenic. Then another change that happened is in 2019 onwards, the European Union has actually halved this export requirement. Earlier it was chloramphenicol, malachite, green, and nitrofuran were actually 1 ppm, 0.3 ppm. Now it has become half of that. There's new thing, something called reference point for action has come for prohibited substances. So the testing requirement has become more stringent. So the compliance for testing or compliance for export also is very difficult for Indian exporters now to comply with the new regulation that has come 2019 and it will be applicable from November 2022 onwards. So I have covered all the things. Apart from that, another thing is circular economy. Many people are working in colleges and in universities with circular economic feed ingredients, so that everything gets utilized. And we can have feed ingredients which is developed from the waste of the fish and prevent adulteration, allergen control program in fish processing industries. Another big risk or another big challenge or research input for the people who are participating in this refresher course is migration from packaging materials, because people have started consuming food which are in packaged products. There are chances of many hazardous substances which are present in the packaging material may migrate to the fish and be hazardous again. So these are the challenges that our researchers must take into consideration or for making the product safer or making the product, making the consumers like healthy. Then again, we have transparency and traceability in the precision trade. Number of things are coming up in, as you know, blockchain technology has come up. So again, seafood industry is eager to adapt this technology. So in few days, we'll have a different kind of perspective building up in having transparency and traceability in seafood trade. A consumer will know from which pond or which area the fish had been harvested and who actually transported it, how it was stored, what was the temperature during transportation. Everything will be known to the consumer. Then the technology for integration of food safety regulation. Now, the technology is when you go to see the 8th class, 9th class students are now studying about artificial intelligence, machine learning. So all these things will be now coming part of our food safety regulation. Now emerging hazard forecasting is a new area that is coming up. Now we can say in a pond like whether the fish is going to die, or you can say whether it is going to be affected by white spot virus in another 15 days or not. So this kind of research is also coming up. Similarly, AI-based, artificial intelligence-based technology for integrating resource utilization and multi-isotope fingerprint technology for authentication, whether it's captured from the aquaculture pond or for the sea, whether it's from the America or African region, everything can be known by isotope fingerprinting technology. And the challenge will be also regulating the high pressure process, the new technology that is coming up, like high pressure processing and ohmic heating, pulse electric field, electron beam radiation. These all four will be a major role in the coming days in preserving the seafood. So, so for these new regulations are almost coming. And another thing is hardware miniaturization and rapid data capture. For example, you want to analyze antibiotics in fish, you have to take into the laboratory, which is having a 3.3 crore rupees LC-MS equipment, weighing around 300 kg. But nowadays, research is going on to make it miniaturized. We are working on with one Netherlands organization where the LC-MS is only 8 kg. You can carry on your backpack, go to the farm, take out a string, just push it into the, take out a muscle and push into the instrument, we'll know what is the level of oxytetracycline or chloramphenicol. So this kind of machination or hardware miniaturization is coming up, which will be a major I can say, change that regulations will have in our seafood sector. So thank you. I have overstood by some 3 minutes. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'll be happy to answer the questions, whatever we have learned in this class. Thank you. Thank you all.
If you have any questions, please ask the sir. So there's one question in chat. Do we have maximum menstrual limits of each constant like pesticides, heavy metals, and microbial toxins of weapons stores of toxicity? And this is the first question.
do you have maximum residual limits of each contaminant like pesticides, heavy metals, heavy metals, and microbial toxins of reference dose toxicity? What is this reference dose toxicity? No. The thing is, we have maximum residual limits for pesticide. For example, pesticides in FSSAI we have limits, in quinalphos and carbaryl. Heavy metals we have limits for different commodities, for crustaceans, for finfish, for bivalve mollusks, cephalopods we have limits. Microbial toxins we don't have limits so far. Apart from histamine, we don't have limit for staphylococcal enterotoxins. But marine biotoxins we have limits.
Second question is, how can we know the product is free from antibiotic residue?
It's very simple. There is nothing great in that. By visually, of course, we cannot see that. It has to be tested in a laboratory by a mass spectrometry, which is a confirmatory method. There are also screening methods available, ELISA-based screening methods available. So you can use that and know that it is free from antibiotics.
Any other questions, or if you want to interact with sir, please go ahead.
Somebody from Archana Saturaj has raised a hand.
Archana, please go ahead. If you have any question, ask it, sir. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Participants, your mic is turned on. Please ask the question.
Good afternoon, sir. Myself, B.K. Patti from College of Fisheries, Rangalonda.
Yes.
Sir, what is in BIS you have mentioned the vertical standard. So, what are the types of standard, and what do you mean by vertical standard?
Okay. So you will find a thing called sometimes vertical standard and horizontal standard in many standard bodies. Vertical standards means a product specific standards. For example, you talk about fish oil. Now, how fish oil is made, what is the product definition, the standard that includes product definition, from what kind of fishes are used for making the fish oil. It includes also the contaminant requirement, contaminant profile, or what kind of microbiological limits are there. So it encompasses everything, starting from production to everything. It's called vertical standard. Whereas horizontal standard means, for example, cadmium requirement in food commodities. So it may be different for fish, different for you can say banana, different for a confectionery, for a toffee. So these are called horizontal standards. Sometimes many regulators, they do not make vertical standard. They will make only vertical. They do not make vertical standard. They will make only horizontal standards. Okay, so they will make a limit of cadmium or limit of lead or limit of mercury in different commodities. So those are called horizontal standards. But when you make vertical standard, means I am telling this is how the fish. For example, you see the frozen fish. We have a standard of frozen fish standard in FSSAI. It will tell you that the freezing has to be done in such a way that the core temperature of the fish must reach minus 18 degrees centigrade. The standard is telling. So you cannot simply put a fish in the freezer and tell it's a frozen fish. Okay.
Okay.
If only you are using a freezing technology, which is reducing the temperature to minus 18 degrees centigrade at the core, geometrical core, then only it can be called as a frozen fish. So the standard is telling that. Okay, so these are called vertical standards.
Okay, sir. Sir, my next question is, there are two criteria you told regarding microbial specifications. So
Yes.
what are the two criteria?
Yeah, there are two criteria followed, both in European Union as well as in India by FSSAI. One is called food hygiene criteria and one is called food safety criteria. Okay, food hygiene criteria is not enforceable. You cannot simply penalize a person based upon food hygiene criteria. But if the food safety criteria is exceeding, then that person is legally penalized. For example, food hygiene criteria, as far as India is concerned, includes aerobic plate count, okay, coagulous positive staphylococci, and eastern mold. In FSSAI, we have made a regulation that the maximum limit of aerobic plate count in frozen fish should not be more than 10 to the power 7. Okay, 10 to the power 7 CFU per gram. Now, you take a sample from the market and test it. Okay, it is 10 to the 8, right? you cannot take a legal action based upon this. You can only say that your criteria is not unhygienic. If you repeat it, probably your license will be cancelled. But but in the food safety criteria, it mentioned that salmonella should be absent. Now, if salmonella is present, that person is punishable as per the Food Safety Act.
Okay, sir. Sir, my third question is,
Yes.
in a circle, in risk analysis,
Hmm.
you have mentioned 3 circles. It is risk assessment, another is risk management, and third one is what, sir?
Risk communication.
Risk communication. Sir, in risk communication, what are the things being dealt?
Yeah, for example, risk communication is a very great area. I will tell risk communication is not done by the researchers or not by the academicians. Risk communication is done by the government, okay, or by the regulators. For example, India, risk communication has to be done by FSSAI. Example. Now, we say sometimes that pregnant women should not consume tuna, okay, or sardine or any highly migratory pelagic fish, because it can potentially contain mercury, and mercury, as you know, if it is present in the food, then it may lead to neuromotor retardation in the kid, the offspring. Similarly, you say Listeria monocytogenes, okay, is a hazard, and the pregnant ladies should not take food which potentially contain Listeria monocytogenes. So these are the advisories given by the regulators. This is nothing but risk communication. When they give advisories, for example, FSSAI gave the advisory recently for formaldehyde. The guidance note was issued by FSSAI that what are the advisory for the food processor, for the consumers, for all the people in the market chain, how to prevent food from getting adulterated. Even the consumers, how to know that there is formaldehyde in the fish. So these are nothing but risk communication.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, my another question is, sir, what is fusion products?
Fusion. Yeah, fusion product in the sense we sometimes call mostly we are talking about your technology-oriented fusion. Like it is a fish, but it is a cell culture-based product. Okay, like cell-grown meat, lab-grown meat. Those concepts are coming right now, right? So people are also taking without killing a fish or without killing a goat, you are getting chicken or mutton from the lab itself. So this technology is called fusion product. Fusion of the technology, right?
Okay, sir. Sir, my last one, sir.
Yes.
Sir, what is blockchain technology, sir?
Yeah, blockchain, that I told you. Blockchain is, if you, that will take another class to understand this whole blockchain. But blockchain is nothing based upon the principle of traceability, right? Blockchain concept is mostly used in what? Your, what is that called? Bitcoin. You go and see the Bitcoins. Everybody's talking about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. That is nothing but blockchain. Okay, this is nothing but, where from every link in the food chain, if I transfer to the food chain or food system, every link in the food chain is linked, or every node in the food chain is linked. So a fisherman catches the fish in the sea. Now he passes some certain information that I caught fish from this water. Okay, this is the tool I used. I caught by trawl net. This particular time, this particular boat. Okay, this information is passing on to the supplier while transferring the fish to the supplier. He's not only transferring the fish, he's transferring this information. Now the supplier also adds something to it. A supplier also gives some information. Now I got it from this fellow at this particular time. I transported by this container this time to the processor. So okay, processor also uses additives, okay, different things. Okay, now what is happening is all these things are linked in the chain. So what happens is that whenever you want to take a decision on this, advantage is this. Whenever you want to take a decision, for example, there is an outbreak of disease. Now you know that where from this thing has happened, and you can directly take action. If this blockchain is integrated, for example, you purchase a frozen fish block from the market from nearby your Bhubaneswar. Now you know that you will be able to know, or the regulator will be able to know that this fish was taken from Balasore region, okay, from this particular pond. So you can go immediately take sample and see that that particular hazard is there or not. It helps in regulation. Also, it minimizes the cost overall cost also it minimizes. Okay, it also gives transparency into the whole system. You can also prevent this malpractice that is coming into this. Now there is a main problem with industry is malpractice, no? Like people adulterate in between, like formaldehyde. Suppose a fish is loaded in Andhra Pradesh and goes to Assam. Now it comes through Odisha, and Odisha some people use formaldehyde and again transfer it to Northeast. So this all practices can be stopped with blockchain technology. People are integrated into the system.
Sir, in HACCP, these things are also there, no? In HACCP?
No, HACCP is again a guideline thing. No, HACCP is only say you do it. HACCP doesn't talk properly about traceability. HACCP starts with in an industry, you receive the fish, and you process the fish. HACCP stops there. Okay, but where from you got the fish and how it reaches to the consumer table, it is not part of HACCP. That's why this FSMS came into picture. But it was not very clear cut. It is a technology, understand. It was a concept earlier. Blockchain is a technology. There are a number of servers. Everything is working on that. It's a completely software-driven program. It's not that so easy that what we perceive.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. It's an honor to me to listen something from you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And thank you for asking a lot of questions that is expected from participants. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other question? Thank you very much, sir. I deeply appreciate the wonderful presentation you made it at the meeting. We sincerely appreciate you for taking out from your busy schedule to provide us with such valuable information.
Thank you, madam.
This has not a huge pause to us, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we will leave the call and join tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you.